talk for everybody. And I am Jonathan Winnick, and I am an infrastructure engineer in my company's projects department. So I typically work on things like firewalls, switches, just like reconfiguring things or doing optimizations, and basically everything that fills in the blank. And this is Derek Silk, and I'll let him take the lead.
I'm a information security risk analyst, so I do everything third party risk management, and I basically manage our compliance with NIST cybersecurity framework. So
Now that's a tall order doing this. You feel like things are like going pretty well so far, or do you feel like it's just like you're just like swimming in it day to day?
you know, NIST is it's a different beast. I will say to do a really good job, like let's say you're by yourself and you didn't have any guidance whatsoever. It really does require like security architect level knowledge because you really do you have to converse. So there's a set of outcomes, right? A set of cybersecurity outcomes that are very high level, and in order to determine what your company's current state is versus the framework, you really need to be able to conversationalize all of these different domains. And I mean, it covers every aspect of cybersecurity from what I've learned. So I'm really fortunate and blessed to have someone above me who's been in cybersecurity since computers were invented. So, you know, anytime I have a question, like he just knows the answer, and he's said he's done this. I think he said he's done it dozens of times. At this
Dozens?
point,
Oh my
based
god!
off what he's
This guy's
based
got
off what
this guy's got 100 years of experience in 30 years. Good
he
lord!
does. Yeah, he's really bright, man. He's like the type of person where, like, say your boss wants you to start reporting on certain metrics. Like he'll be the type who doesn't even know how to code, but he'll buy a book on coding and learn how to code and like develop a website for like reporting. Like that's and that's literally what he's been doing. So like,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, no, it's been a really good learning experience for sure. And I think something that a lot of people need to realize too is like most jobs in cyber, when you first start, you're going to feel incompetent and you're going to be incompetent, and that's just that imposter syndrome that everybody talks about. That's real. So if you feel that way, it's normal. If you don't feel that way, you're probably weird. So
yeah, that's what I say. And I've had that conversation with my boss too. Where he was talking about kind of hiring different people, and he would kind of talk to me in a way that he's really focused on people who like have that ability to learn. Especially to like having a good personality, and like you said, kind of to compare with not knowing something and then like going out and buying a book like and completely just trying to master it, or at least get to like a level where you're decently proficient in it. And by the way, like that in and of itself is like a complete skill too. Like because like I've had people at past jobs where they're like, they don't know how to do something, and they're like, their first reaction is to like turn to their coworker and be like, hey, how do I do this? And like, there's really nothing wrong with that. But it's also like a good skill because like sometimes you're going to have situations in your life, like I'm sure you've experienced, where like you don't have anybody around you who is going to know how to do X, Y, and Z. And being able to like, I call it like search, Google search sharpshooting, like basically being able to like go in there and like figure out what you need to be looking at is like a skill too. And that's
mm,
super important because you will run into that. There will be, maybe you're trying to implement something that nobody's ever done. So having those skills is like, super top tier. And being able to convey
there,
them is even better.
there's a good book that I read, and probably a lot of people have read, called "The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People." Um, and the author Stephen Covey, his name is. He talks about that, and he calls it using your R&I, using your resourcefulness and initiative, and it's definitely important. Because like you said, I mean, so like say for example, you're trying to learn something new, and you have a boss who knows it. It's like they can't give you all their free time, so you have to be very efficient in how you let them use their free time, because their whole job's not going to be revolving around teaching you what you need to know. So you really have to, you really do have to use, you have to take the initiative and figure out how to make it easier for them to teach you, if that makes sense.
No, I think that's really well explained. Because like you said, as much as people want to learn and want to teach, because like I like teaching people things too. Sometimes there's just not always an opportunity, or like like you said, people are really bogged down with their day-to-day tasks. So just having that kind of resourcefulness, and I think that kind of leads me into like, you and me, we have like kind of like similar backgrounds, but like we kind of came about them like different ways. So I definitely would like to kind of talk more about that and kind of see where our similarities lie, and maybe we can come up with some things out of that that would be helpful for other people.
Yeah, for sure.
So what would you say? What would you say is like your most defining feature, um, or I should say maybe skill set, trying to get into IT? Like, what do you really think was the silver bullet, so to speak?
I've kind of thought about this before, and I don't really think there's, a silver bullet. I think most of it just comes to hard work and persistence, because the job market is hard right now, and it doesn't matter how much experience you have to expect to apply to hundreds of jobs. I've seen people, and I'm not trying to call people out, but like I've seen people who apply to like 20 jobs and they get discouraged already. And like I get it. Like it depends on your circumstances. Everyone's in a different place in life, but you can't get discouraged after 20 jobs. I mean, you have to be expecting. In my opinion, you have to expect to apply to 500 jobs at the minimum before you're starting to get like solid interviews. Um, so that's one part of it. And then also, it just comes with experience in interviewing. Like if you have a bad interview, right, and you don't get the job, you just try not to look at it in a negative way, because I've had so many interviews in my past where, I know I did a bad job, and it's all just practice. You get better over time. It's something you just learn to get comfortable with. You really have to just learn to relax before your interviews. And something that people don't really do is really making sure that every time a question that's asked of you, you tie your answer into what the job description is looking for. So there's a wide variety of what the job description could be, but make sure that all your answers tie into what that job is looking for, and you just have to keep that at the top of your mind. And I
Right.
think that's the most important part of interviews. And actually, funny enough, I made a TikTok about this today, but I think one of the most important questions that people fumble is, and this is probably the most common question too, that interviewers ask you um, is tell me about yourself. And a lot of people will just go on and go on a little rant
Yeah.
about, their hobby.
And that's what I was gonna guess. I was gonna guess when you were leading up to that. I had a feeling
Yeah,
it was that one.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's a great question. And I've been asked it in pretty much every one of my interviews. And like you could easily fumble that, because you could just go on to say, "Oh, I like this sport, I like play fantasy football." Like nobody cares about that, and like no offense, but like nobody cares. Like
Yeah.
you're applying for a job, they want to know what you can do to make their life easier in training you and to generate revenue for the company, right?
Yeah. They want to know your working persona. They want to know that you know, hey, like, this is who I am, this is what I've studied, this is how I keep up on my skills, this is what I can do for you, and articulate that in a way that they're going to appreciate, that kind of ties into like who you are as a person and who you would be within that company.
Exactly.
Versus like you said, I like fantasy sports or video
But video,
games or whatever else, just finding the right
I
ways to say it.
in one of my first interviews when I was like fresh out of college, I was in a completely different field, but I remember saying that, and I look back and I cringe on that.
You're just
But
like, ugh. Yeah.
I'm grateful for the experience though, because like I said, I mean, like what you want to call it, failed interview is, to me, is an experience in of itself. So
Yeah, it's just an ability for you to really like hone, your capabilities and really get things kind of squared away, like you said.
yeah.
So,
What about you, man?
well, I came from, desktop support. I did that for 2 years. Kind of cut my chops on that, and then ended up applying at my current company and am working here and am just furiously learning every single day. Running into things that I've never dealt with before. Like we said, and that kind of just goes back to that. Um, what did you call it? You called it with the book. It was the R&I, right?
Yeah, using your resourcefulness and initiative. Yeah,
Yeah, the amount of time that I spend reading things is definitely a fair amount. And I do have a lot of like implicit knowledge. Like I can look at a situation and kind of tell maybe where the root cause of something is, or a lot of things like working with different vendors. Is more new to me, and having to talk to them and figure things out, or coming across like weird issues that maybe people haven't ever dealt with before. Like I think in my first like 3 months with my current company, like I was basically creating the process and the workflow for pushing out a security platform through Exchange, and creating like templates and the process workflow for actually setting all that stuff up for like every client that subscribes to like our security platform. So like that was kind of like a wake up call. I went from like fixing helping Alice with her Outlook to like, hey, like design this entire like process workflow, and then after that take these two firewalls, put them on your back, carry them down the street, and then go install them. So like it's
that
just been like it's pretty much everything I wanted, because my ultimate goal is just to really progress within networking and maybe pick up some like automation skills. So I mean it's been awesome, but it has been a wild ride. For 3 years ago, I was slinging a sledgehammer and using a cutting torch, working on railroad equipment. To now I'm over here like troubleshooting like access rules with firewalls, and deploying different equipment, and sitting on vendor calls, and just having a great time doing it.
that's awesome, man. And I I was thinking when you were talking, so like something this just made me think of this. So like I don't know about you and your experience, but I feel like one of the hardest things about getting into cyber is kind of just learning like corporate etiquette. Um,
Oh, that is such a huge part. Like the no changes after Friday, or after Thursday at 3, and
yeah,
hey, maybe don't email anybody until 9 a.m. No, I'm just kidding. You can
yeah,
definitely email people in the morning, but
and
like
how like
there's definitely like a little bit of politics that kind of go into that, and I think that that's something that is maybe like doesn't need to be talked about a ton, but it's definitely like a point, right? Like learning how to politic within a company, and like get to know people's strengths and weaknesses, and like how to talk to people, essentially. And like that's definitely like a core skill that I think is important, kind of like you said.
yeah, nobody teaches that stuff, and I think
Yeah.
it's always really helpful to have somebody above you who's willing to show you the basic stuff like that.
Yeah. Now
Because
I think like one of the big things that I think about too, like with people that are trying to get in, like I really feel like this industry is just, there's just so much to it. Like with even my position, your position, like there's just so many things. It would be really hard to do it if you weren't interested in it. So I say to the people like that want to, are thinking they're going to turn a quick buck, like you're not going to be able to. Like it's not going to go that way. I mean, maybe like if you're the 1% or you're the exception to the rule, but ideally, it's probably going to take a little bit of time. It may not be years, but you're going to have to really dedicate a good chunk of time to it, learning. I spend a lot of time after hours trying to like fiddle with things to better understand my daily job, and I would say that that's something that I think is vital. Maybe not a hard fast rule, but I definitely think
especially
it's prevalent.
especially early in your career, you need to be doing that extra work. Yeah, I completely agree. And those people who think you're just gonna join the field for a quick buck, you'll quickly weed yourselves out. And I don't even say that to be mean. Like I say that because it's probably for the best for you anyway. Like nobody should be seeking a job just for money. Like I know you gotta provide for your family, but if you don't enjoy your work, then there's no reason to be doing it. It's 2024. There's so many options out there. So
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I really think, especially going through this process, and going from like more 0 to 60, so to speak, over the last couple of years, I notice a lot of the things that I see with people is, cert this, cert that, trade this cert for X job. And it's like, I feel like one thing that would be helpful for people to keep in mind, like while you're getting a cert or while you're learning something, like let the certification itself be the byproduct of what you're learning. So kind of like, in other words, don't necessarily make the certification itself like the goal, right? Like make the knowledge that you pick up the goal, and then let the certification be the byproduct of everything that you're learning. And I feel
yeah,
like that is something that I see a lot, um, that I really think would help people, is to kind of like, when you're going in, you're trying to get that first job, like really keep that mindset, because that's gonna, not only is it gonna help you grasp the material better, but it's also gonna, inevitably it's gonna end up making you a better troubleshooter, because you're gonna have a better process, a better workflow. Like you're gonna look at things in more detail, and it's just gonna help you overall.
yeah, and I can speak to that too. When I first started my role, I I have like a weird habit of like telling people how I learned certain things, and I was telling my team how when I took CISSP, I learned this, and my boss like pulled me aside in a nice way, like a week later, and he's like, telling people about your CISSP doesn't give you credibility, and he had a really good point. It's like you can learn things from your certs, but they really don't define you. And a good cybersecurity manager, they don't care about your certs. They care about your knowledge, and they'll be able to test your knowledge. It's the only people who care about certs are HR in all reality, because certs mean nothing. You could go to a boot camp, learn something for a week, and then you forget it. The next week or the next month. So in reality, like how much is that helping you? So don't be like Ash Ketchum. You don't have to catch them all.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
take the ones that you learn the most from, and use those to get your first job and just move on.
yeah, absolutely. And just like with Josh's course, having tangible labs and things that you're doing, like aside from getting certifications, like being able to like, it's one thing to have like, say you go out and you get, AZ 104, right, which is like Microsoft's like, main Azure cert. So say you go out and you get that, like that is good, right? But it really would speak volumes, I think, to talk to somebody that's like, hey, like, I built, this environment, and I have it I have it Azure domain joined as well. Like, it's a hybrid environment, and I did this, and I created these, and I have these GPOs with these groups, and it's spread across X, Y, and Z for redundancy. Um, I think that's speaks a lot more than, more so having the piece of paper. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it definitely like will complement everything, to then be able to have something that's aside from the piece of paper that you can maybe show and talk about.
Yeah, I mean that resume is, or that sorry, that internship is better than any certification you'll have, because companies care about experience more
Yeah.
than anything.
Oh, absolutely.
And being able to hack that is big.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, Josh
I
definitely, he definitely did a solid with that one. It's definitely
I
like a unique opportunity that I don't think a lot of other training really can offer right now.
did did you leverage that to get your first job? Like, do you think that was like instrumental in getting your first job?
What part? Josh's course?
The internship.
So I actually didn't do the internship, just because like I was already working in IT, so I felt like it was, um, kind of like
Yeah,
more redundant at that point, at least for me.
yeah,
But I will say, coming from not necessarily having like the most ideal about how cloud works, to doing that, like I have a much better idea of how things work and how to configure different things, like we did in the course.
Yeah, kind of makes you realize how vast the field is.
Yeah, it's crazy. You just get done learning one thing, and then all of a sudden it's something else.
I feel like you have to job hop to be extremely knowledgeable because say you work at a bank, like a small bank, you're not gonna know like DevSecOps and like there's so many domains and I feel like there's not one company out there who you'll get to learn all that experience, at
Yeah,
least from so far. And I see it in my boss. Like I looked at his resume, and he's been in many industries, and I think that's why he knows so much.
yeah. That's one thing I appreciate. Because I left a very like relaxed corporate environment IT to come work at an MSP. And that's one thing that I will say, if I could recommend to like people trying to break in, like look look at your local MSPs, look them
Mhm.
up and see if they're hiring because typically like they're more willing to like train people who are like hungry for the knowledge and want to actually like gain that experience versus like corporate IT that's a little bit more rigorous. Typically has a little bit more requirements as far as like applications and applicants. Because you'll learn a lot. Not only like will you have an opportunity to like cross train with a lot of different MSPs because
Yeah.
they're just typically smaller and they need you to do more. But you'll just be exposed to, like you said, so many different environments. Like I work in construction, healthcare, banking, law firms. I mean, you name it. Like I've seen tons of different environments, and each one of them have their own caveats. So it kind of teaches you to be more flexible and more willing to look at things and start from scratch if you had to because you may not know that environment that you're walking into and that that's happened to me plenty of times.
Yeah, and the reason I laughed is because anytime someone says to start in help desk, I always think of a Reddit post where they say the only require the only requirement to work in help desk is to have a pulse. It's a great learning experience. It's something that I skipped, but I know that I would have gotten tremendous benefit from, and I think that the path I chose in governance, risk, and compliance, it's a little bit easier to avoid that route, but in the end, like if you want to be completely competent, you really do need to know the basic troubleshooting and networking because networking is instrumental in any domain in cybersecurity. So without that knowledge, you're pretty useless, or you might not think you are, but your team will. They won't respect you.
Yeah, they'll yell at you behind your back. No, I'm just kidding.
And it's legit though, bro. Like the thing is like if you don't know networking, you won't be respected. And it's not like to be mean, but like, I was going through practice interview questions for my teams to, evaluate our current state with NIST. And I don't know networking that well. And when we touched that domain, my boss was like, I should probably take the networking part. And he was being nice about it, but like, I knew what he meant. And he has a point. It's like if you're going to interview your teams, like you want to come off as competent, or else they're not going to respect what you're doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, like we said, I think there's definitely more than one way to go about it. Definitely help desk is like something that I mean, I think is foundational, not necessarily a requirement, but it definitely gives you like a more holistic approach. When
Hmm.
you start moving into that second and third and fourth tier job, kind of like what you're saying. If you felt like if you were gonna like bridge the gap, like what would you recommend to like people listening to this? Like, if they were in your shoes, or maybe they get into a job and they're like not quite sure about X domain, like what skills do you think would be pivotal in trying to bridge that gap?
So I think what it really comes down to is how desperate you are to increase your salary fast, right? Like everyone has different situations. Some people might have a spouse who makes good money, and you could just be working for benefits, or you could be the sole breadwinner and you're really trying to increase your salary fast. In that case, I would say like try to skip help desk if you can, because like I'll be honest, help desk doesn't pay well, and it kind of it gives you a little pause in your earning potential. Um, but if you're trying to do things the right way and you want to really solidify your baseline knowledge, then I definitely think that you should go that route. Um, if that makes sense. But if you're trying to bridge your knowledge, I'm not really sure how to bridge that knowledge if you skip help desk. I mean, there's some certifications out there, but I'm not really sure like what can. You could probably touch on this more than me. Is what could fill that knowledge gap if you did skip help desk?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. You definitely, it definitely takes longer going the traditional route. So I definitely don't disagree with you there. I think as far as like bridging the gap, I just think it really depends on at what level you're trying to operate at, right? So like if you're just trying to get a general overview of networking in general, and you're just trying to understand what subnetting is, how to identify a device in a LAN, what is a firewall, how does it work, what is a router, how does that play into a topology, then I really think, and I can speak to both these certs because I have both. I think Network Plus is probably more than enough for that. But if you're more in like a technical focused job where you're actually installing equipment and you're having to troubleshoot routes and you're trying to figure out, different access rules, I really would recommend people get CCNA. And I know that's not like a light ask because it took me 10 months of studying and labbing to get it. And
Mm.
even I still, to this day, will practice like, I'll pull up Packet Tracer and, I'm starting to make a little bit more content. I'll make like my own labs. And even I sometimes I'm like, okay, wait, now I got to look back and how to do this again, because it's been a few months. So
Yeah.
I really think it really just depends. But I think everybody, if you're interested in keeping a technical focus on your career, I highly, highly recommend CCNA. Just for the sheer fact of it will show you networking and then it will show you how to network. Network Plus is going to give you that high level overview, and you're going to have like a pretty good understanding. But they're just in two separate categories, in my opinion. Taking both.
Yeah, I think the point is like no matter where you find yourself working, take what you can. This field is, or the job market right now is very difficult. Take what you can, and any chance you can get to learn networking, take it because it is fundamental to any engineering role. I mean, really any role in cyber. I can't think of a role where not knowing networking knowledge is going to be a good thing.
Yeah. I think a lot of people avoid it, but like when you really boil it down and you actually like think about definable skills in this, like every single thing that we do is connected by a network.
Yeah,
Any system we're trying to protect, any framework we're trying to implement, anything that we're trying to install or fix, it's in a network somewhere. So,
yeah,
I mean, it definitely has, I would say like a pretty high weight to it, and it's just my opinion. I think it's crucial, like in someone's career, and not just for the now or the job you're in, but for life, for your entire career. It's not going to change. Networking's not going anywhere. It may be a
like
little
try,
bit more abstract in the cloud, but it's
it's like
everything
trying
still
to,
moves on a wire. So
it's like trying to be a spider without having the ability to make a web.
yeah, that's exactly how it is. I mean, how are
Like
you going to catch food?
exactly, like it's the framework that underlies it all. Like, yeah, I'm
Yeah,
a little spider.
yeah. I
Without
think
be like one of them those nasty ticks where they like hold their hands up in the air like this and they try
yeah.
to grab something.
Yeah. Well, right when you walk by, they snatch you. Yep, that's exactly it. Now,
Dude,
I think
I
I think
hate
too. Like, my tip for people would be like, because and even I feel this like even in my day to day job. So like, if you feel like you said, kind of how we touched on earlier, like if you feel overwhelmed, like don't panic. Like don't panic. You know, there just take it day by day. Like, spend if you can only spend a few hours a week like working on a skill, like just be purposeful with the time, right?
Mm.
But don't feel out of bounds or like overwhelmed if you don't know something. Or if you're trying to learn something and it's just not quite clicking yet. Like I think it took me like probably like a good month and like actually practicing subnetting. Like now I can like look at a network and I'm like, oh, okay, that IP host is in that. And like, but it took me like a while like of doing it and like actually looking at it. It was not like I like studied it and I was just like, oh, it's over there. Like, no, I was still like, okay, I have no idea what I'm looking at.
I
So
feel like there's so many levels to knowledge in cyber. Like, there's one level, it's like, oh, I know that acronym. And then
yeah,
there's a second level, it's like,
yeah,
well, what the heck does that acronym even do? Or like, what does
yeah,
that mean?
yeah. You're
And
not
then, like,
wrong. I mean, there's like
and then how
there's
implement it.
implicit knowledge and then explicit knowledge, and I think
Mm.
that's kind of what you're saying is like you may know what something is, but do you know what it is? Do you know how it works? And it's okay if you don't, but spend the time and work on those things. Especially if it's like your day to day job and you're trying to figure it out. Nothing wrong with that because there's so much to know. Like you're not going to know everything off the bat. So
I think it just boils down to expect to be uncomfortable and don't expect to know everything anytime soon. I mean, you're looking at a 10-year plan, buddy.
minimum.
Whoever you are, you're looking at a 10-year plan to actually feel confident. Um, at least like, I've been doing this for 2 years now, and it looks like, maybe 20% of the way there to feeling like actually competent,
Yeah.
like as a whole, in everything that I'm doing.
Hey, twenty
So
percent is pretty good. You should give yourself more credit. That's a high number, I think.
like complete rough mental math, but like, yeah,
Yeah.
just for context, if you just started, you're gonna get that imposter syndrome. Um, the only people I've seen who don't have imposter syndrome are people who've been in the field for decades. So
Yeah, and that's God's honest truth is even if I've done something before, like, and I have to do it again, sometimes even I look at it and I'm just like, okay, like I'm gonna read the documentation one more time just to make sure, you know. So don't feel to people who are listening, don't feel discouraged. Like if it takes you a few times to really understand something, there's nothing wrong with that. Because at least for me, I know like doing it once is like not enough. Like I have to do it like 3 4 times, and then I start to like it. It becomes a little bit more second nature.
we'll put it this way: it's better than half-assing it to make
Yeah,
sure that.
absolutely. If you don't know something, and that's one thing, like to people listening, like that's one thing that I talked about with my boss, my current boss, is like and I told him I was like I have no problem saying like, hey, I have no idea, like, or I don't know that, but I'll find out, and people like hearing that because it shows that you're going to be someone with initiative. You're going to be like, hey, like I don't know how this works or why it's broken, but I'm going to look into it, and maybe it's not fixable, or maybe you can't find the answer, but showing that determination and like that grit like out the gate like is it's just to me it's like not even like in a technical role, just in like any role, like it's crucial, like that is crucial. So like
Yeah,
getting yourself into that mindset of like, okay, I don't know what this is and I don't know why it's broken, but like not panicking, but being like, okay, I'm going to start at step 1 and I'm going to go all the way through step 100 and I'm going to look at all these different pieces and figure out why it's not working. And like that's the mindset of
that's
someone who's in IT.
that's huge. And I don't know about you, but I've seen people in Josh's Discord post that. At least they've posted it multiple times about how interviewers loved hearing them say, I don't know, instead of them trying to just wing up like a bad answer to the question, and just try to make it up on the fly. Like just saying, being honest and saying, I don't know this. It really does go a long way.
Yeah, and just because the last thing they want is like someone, if you're in a technical role and you don't know about something, but then you're making like a critical change on something and like it bricks the network, or you okay something that maybe didn't need to be okayed or shouldn't have been okayed. Like definitely having the humbleness, so to speak, to just make sure like you can convey that you don't know, you know whatever you're trying to do, and figuring out the answer instead of just guessing, kind of like you said.
Yeah, that's huge, man.
So what are your top 3 tips for somebody who's looking to break in 2024 in this crazy, ridiculous job market?
So number one, persistence. You're not going to get a job if you apply to 20 jobs. If you do, then you got super lucky, super blessed, whatever your flavor.
The
Um,
exception, not the rule.
exactly. Expect to apply to, at least from what I've seen from various people, expect to apply to 500 jobs until you actually get an offer. And tip number two, if you've applied to hundreds of jobs and you haven't gotten an interview, then your resume sucks. Um, Someone
So
had to say,
yeah, so definitely get it reviewed or have a few people look at it.
go on Reddit, search on Google, resume review plus Reddit. Reddit is the best place for that. Those people, they will roast your resume, and they do a great job. Honestly, that's how I first made my first resume pretty good, where I got my first cyber job. Um, and then I'd say for the third thing, when you do eventually land an interview with a job that you think that you want, um, really look at that job description and look at look at a bunch of behavioral interview questions. From what I found is technical interview questions are way lesser important than behavioral interview questions. I've done a lot of interviews in the last couple of years, and I've gotten offered pretty much every job I've interviewed for. And behavioral interview questions seem to be the dominant force. And I really think that you need to have good answers to those and really like rehearse them in your head and figure out how your answer can be construed as a positive for the company. Um, Never ever say that the reason you left your old company is because of salary, because that just makes you like I don't care what you think in your head, but how it looks, but it looks bad, right? Like that, your next company is going to say, "Oh, well, they only care about salary. They'll leave me for the next higher paying salary job. So why would we hire them?" You
Yeah,
know?
I think that's a good point. I think just kind of to echo everything that you said, I think that all is very pertinent and sound advice for anybody that's listening. And just to add on to that, like you said, be consistent. Be purposeful with your time. Uh, Spend time. Like I said, even with the certifications, spend time making the certification the byproduct of the learning. Apply to as many jobs as you can, because it really at this point it's just a numbers game. But if you do get into those situations where you're actually getting to an interview, like you said, practice the behavioral questions, because most people are going to want to work with someone who has a decent personality and can admit when they're wrong, and is willing to learn, and has that drive and has that initiative. And I think, from at least from what I've seen, those are some of the most important things, because IT skills, all that stuff can be taught.
Yeah. No, they're for sure important. Don't get me wrong. Technical questions are important too, but you know, for example, my last interview process, there was I think 8 rounds, and some people might say that's extreme, and that's cool. You can have your opinion, but 7 of the 8 rounds were behavioral, and only 1 round was technical. So,
Wow.
and this company does things the right way when it comes to interviewing. I've worked for a lot of companies, and you know, I've owned a business before, which failed. Not trying to brag about it, but like they do things the right way when it comes to the interviewing, and um, for what it's worth.
Well, that's good to hear, and I'll definitely be looking forward to our topic next week, and maybe even potentially having some people as guests to kind of like help share their experience, and kind of bring knowledge from different backgrounds to people that might find it useful and might help them.
Yeah, buddy.